the Standing Committee on the Status of Women. I will call this meeting to order. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Tuesday, February 4th, the committee will resume its study on intimate partner and domestic violence in Canada. Compte tenu de la situation,
because of the current pandemic situation and because of the recommendations for public health, in order to maintain your health and safety for those who are participating in the room need to not have any symptoms. They also need to maintain physical distance of 2 meters and need to wear a non-medical mask when moving around in the room, and it is strongly recommended to wear your mask at all times. And they need to also use hand sanitizer that is available at the entrance to the room.
Those participating in virtually, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. You may speak in the official language of your choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your mic will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and verification officer. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly, so not like your chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. Before we welcome our witnesses, I would like to provide this trigger warning. We will be discussing experiences related to violence and assault. This may be triggering to viewers with similar experiences. If you find yourself distressed or you need help, please advise the clerk. I now want to welcome our guests for our first panel. I would like to welcome from the Interval House of Ottawa, Carrie Lewis, who is the Executive Director. Thanks for joining us, Carrie. And from Luke's Place Support and Resource Centre for Women and Children, Pamela Cross, who is the Legal Director. Each of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. When you see me waving around, if you could just start wrapping it up, that'd be fantastic. So I'm now going to pass the floor to Carrie. Carrie, your 5 minutes begin.
Thank you. All right. So ending violence against women and gender-based violence requires communication and collaboration between governments, ministries, the justice system, businesses, social services, and survivors. It requires that every policy in government and across sectors is considered from an intersectional feminist lens. Every leader, every service provider, every interaction where power exists must consider the questions: who is being served, who is being harmed, and who is being left behind by this policy. When we begin to ask these questions, we see that the magnitude of the changes required to prevent and respond appropriately to violence against women is immense. While we strive to create the conditions to achieve systemic change that will prevent violence against women, it is important to narrow in on critical factors that can make an immediate positive change to improve safety for survivors of violence. There exists basic quality of life barriers to survivors that prevent them from successfully exiting an abusive situation. Access to a living income and access to safe housing are the two barriers that we see on a day-to-day basis. Today, I will focus on housing. Interval House of Ottawa and all other violence against women shelters in Ottawa have been operating at maximum capacity for decades. Demand for safe shelter has increased, and people in our community have nowhere to go when they make the difficult decision to leave the abuse. The result is that when families are finally able to access space, we are seeing an intensity of abuse that is much greater than ever before. On the surface, it may appear that more shelter beds are needed. I would argue that this is not the case, at least not if we choose to take a long-term approach. It is instead an issue of a lack of deeply affordable housing. In January 2020, the City of Ottawa declared a housing and homelessness state of emergency. To date, the wait list for subsidized housing has grown to 13,000 households long, and it can take families up to 10 years to secure a home with the city. This crisis is having a devastating impact on women and families across Ottawa, especially those who are survivors of violence. Not only are shelter capacities being reached, but a lack of affordable housing is a significant barrier for survivors to to leave abusive relationships. What's more, a bottleneck effect is created in shelters because women and their families struggle to leave the shelter while rent continues to rise to unaffordable margins. The impact is that families remain in shelter far beyond what is needed to support with immediate safety concerns, and people experiencing violence in their homes cannot access safe shelter in a timely manner. We also cannot ignore that COVID-19 has significantly exacerbated the issue of violence against women. Widespread lockdowns and stay-at-home orders, while necessary from a public health perspective, trap women and their families at home with their abusers. This creates difficult and debilitating conditions that can lead to dangerous situations with tragic outcomes. Global data collected from the UN in 2021 states that 45% of women reported that they or a woman they know has experienced a form of violence since the pandemic started. With the increasing intensity and frequency of violence against women during COVID-19, it has become its own pandemic, coined the shadow pandemic. Now more than ever, women are feeling unsafe at home with little to no options of escape due to barriers like a lack of shelter space and a lack of affordable housing. It has been encouraging to see and experience support from all levels of government over the past couple of years to assist shelters like IHO to continue operating and even expand services during the COVID pandemic. As life begins to return to a new normal, it is critical that we lay a foundation to support women who have faced the greatest impact from the pandemic and are experiencing violence at an accelerated rate. The first step to safety is having a safe place to move to. Without that, taking the next steps to rebuilding life after violence is impossible. All Canadians, but particularly survivors of violence, need access to safe and deeply affordable housing. Housing is a right that many are being denied. This is not an issue that can wait. Families cannot thrive without safe housing. I would call on this government and all governments to prioritize increasing housing stock at an accelerated pace. With adequate investments, partnering with new providers such as shelters like Interval House, we can provide healthier, safer futures for survivors of violence and their dependents.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for your opening statement. We're now going to pass the floor over to Pamela. Pamela, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be with you to speak with you on this important topic. I'm the legal director at Luke's Place in Durham Region, Ontario. We provide direct services to women who've left abusive relationships and are engaged with the family law process. And we also work at the provincial and national levels, conducting research, developing resources, providing training, and engaging in systemic advocacy. We welcome the work of the Status of Women Committee to study intimate partner violence, or IPV, as I'll call it, in Canada, which will, we hope, lead to ongoing government initiatives to both respond to that violence with appropriate services and develop strategies to reduce and ultimately end violence within families in this country. I encourage you, if you haven't had time to do it already, to read the joint submission from Luke's Place and NAL, the National Association of Women in the Law, to see all of our recommendations to the committee. In my remarks this afternoon, I'll raise several key themes. First, any measures to address and end the violence that happens within families must apply an intersectional and gendered analysis. While people of all genders can be victims or perpetrators of IPV, research shows clearly that those who identify as women are disproportionately affected, especially in situations of coercive control or homicide. When attempts to address IPV do not reflect this gendered reality, they're not helpful, and in some cases, they actually cause further harm. Second, potential measures need to take into account the voices of survivors, as well as of advocates and community-based experts who have decades of subject matter experience and expertise. Third, when new laws or policies are under consideration, time must be given for proper consultation with all those who will potentially be affected: victims, survivors, service providers, legal system actors, and so on. So as many perspectives as possible can be included. As well, there needs to be consideration of what we've come to call unintended negative consequences. Acting too quickly can result in a law or policy that leads to further harm for those it is intended to protect. Fourth, when looking at ways to address and end IPV, there needs to be a commitment by all levels of government to work together. For example, increased cohesion and consistency in family laws and their enforcement across all jurisdictions would be of great assistance to survivors of IPV. Fifth, important as education for all those who respond to situations of IPV continues to be, it's now time to build accountability systems to ensure that what has been learned is being applied. Ways of ensuring that all members of the judiciary have education on IPV is critical if legal responses are to improve. Sixth, increased access to justice for survivors is essential. This includes, but is not limited to, access to effective legal representation, regardless of the survivor's ability to pay, expansion across the country of programs such as Ontario's Family Court Support Worker Program, and a big rethink of criminal law responses, including present approaches to bail and mandatory charging and vigorous prosecution policies. Finally, the introduction of Clare's Law, the use of electronic monitoring systems, the criminalization of coercive control in cases of IPV, among many other ideas, are all interesting possible public policy directions, but they warrant a cautious approach. There are cons as well as pros to every one of these ideas. We need a cautious approach that is coupled with careful consideration and extensive consultation. I encourage the committee to consider the recommendations contained in Women's Shelters Canada report to guide the implementation of a national action plan on violence against women and gender-based violence for further and more detailed suggestions. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I welcome any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you so much, Pamela, for your opening statement as well. What we'll be doing is doing our first round of questions. We provide each member 6 minutes to have the questions and answers. We'll be starting off with Dominique Vien. Dominique, you have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I always feel shocked to see how violence against women is so present. We're so well informed nowadays, and it's terrible that we still have this going on. Anyway, thank you to our 2 witnesses for being here today. Thank you for sharing what you see on the field. My first question is for Miss Lewis. Miss Lewis, you referenced the barriers that women face, and so they're not able to get out of a toxic situation. You stated that they face difficulties with having access to decent and affordable housing. Firstly, does your organization offer temporary alternative housing currently in order to support women who are in, if they're in a crisis, they can go to a shelter, but do you offer the possibility of finding housing, temporary housing for them because of the housing crisis that is currently happening in Ottawa?
Thank you for that question. So Interval House of Ottawa is a crisis shelter. So we do provide crisis shelter for people experiencing violence. And we, at the moment, do not have alternative, interim or second stage housing available in our city. There is really nothing like that. So what is happening is that women are staying with us for sometimes up to a year. I've been in this field for about 20 years now. And when I first started, the average length of stay in a crisis shelter was 8 to 10 weeks. That average has now increased to about 4.5 to 5 months. And there just are no options beyond. It's people must wait until they can obtain affordable housing in order to leave the shelter. However, we as an organization are exploring the possibility of developing additional second stage housing units in our city to provide that in-between phase while folks are leaving the emergency shelter and need somewhere to reside temporarily until permanent housing can become available.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Lewis.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis, for your response. So, for those women who have to stay sometimes up to a year with you, I imagine they often have children with them.
Yes, they do.
Et vous avez abordé la question.
And you also mentioned the federal government giving enough funds so that social housing can be built quickly, that's important. What would that amount look like? And how many housing units would be needed quickly? And what does quickly mean for you?
I mean, so honestly speaking, quickly means 5 or 10 years ago. And the number of units, so just in terms of numbers of women that we turned away between April 1st, 2021 and December 31st, 2021, we turned away 500 women and their families who were seeking emergency shelter with us, 500. So the numbers are huge.
And what happened to those women?
So many of them had to stay in their abusive situations until a space could be available. Some were placed in temporary motels within the city of Ottawa. Some of them may have been lucky enough to find space in another shelter locally or outside of the city. The options are very limited and none of them are ideal because the length of time that people are forced to stay in emergency shelters or temporary accommodations creates instability that is really difficult to recover from, especially for kids, because if you can imagine if when children move from one area of a city to another to reside in a shelter, for example, they may have to change schools. And then if they are then transferred, to somewhere else after that, they might have to change schools again. So it's just the lack of housing is creating instability for families on such a large scale that it makes it very difficult for families to move on from the trauma that they've experienced.
10 seconds.
C'est suffisant pour dire merci alors.
I'd have just enough time to say thank you then.
Thank you so much. We're now going to move it over to Anita Vandenbelt. Anita, you have your 5 or 6, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My first questions are for Ms. Lewis. It's good to see you again, Ms. Lewis. I know that in your previous role we worked together on making sure that we built a new women's shelter in my riding, Nelson House. And that's actually the nature of my first question. We know that when women are fleeing intimate partner violence, they often do have children, as you mentioned, but some of them also have disabilities. And I know that with Nelson House we were able to create modular housing so that it could actually be expanded to accommodate different numbers of members in the family for different numbers of children, giving the mother a little bit of privacy, but also the accessibility. So if somebody's in a wheelchair or other physical accessibility needs, can you talk to me about the double challenge for people who might be fleeing a situation at home who have large families, multiple children, or who have disabilities?
Thank you for that question. So in terms of accessibility, I'll start there because Shelters are grassroots movements. They started, 30, 40 years ago, and often it was groups of women who came together in communities and found houses that were, older and affordable, and often were not chosen with accessibility in mind. They were chosen with, cost and sustainability in mind. And shelters are still, many shelters are still, in those older homes or just in the process of trying to upgrade and trying to build shelters or convert shelters to make them more accessible is tricky. So I think we've been in a process for a number of years where we're trying to build purpose-built shelters that meet those accessibility needs. So in terms of accessibility, I think we have a long way to go as a sector to be able to create full accessibility for everyone who needs our services. And that does mean it makes it harder for folks who have those accessibility needs. In terms of larger families, it's a similar story. The buildings, all the shelters were not necessarily purpose built, and so it does make it harder for larger families with 5 or 6 kids to find a place that can accommodate them all. And it's not easy for moms to be in a space, often it's 1 bedroom, sometimes 2 with 5, 6, 7, 8 children. It's certainly a challenge. And so it makes it all the more important for us to find ways to make that pathway to safe, affordable, and permanent housing easier and faster for the folks that we serve.
And I'd like to go to something you said, which personally I actually find very, very shocking, especially given that you're talking about Ottawa, my city, is that 500 women were turned away. That isn't acceptable. I think we all want to see very, very quick action to make sure that changes. Obviously, you talked about housing and you talked about things that might be a little bit longer term in terms of being able to construct. But what would you see that we could do in the short term? What are immediate things that could be done? You said something about second stage housing. Could our rapid housing initiative, for instance, be able to help in this regard?
So if we're looking for a solution this week or next week, I think the only viable solution really is for there to be more funding for temporary spaces like hotel rooms, motel rooms, and converting, motels into more, I wouldn't say long-term housing, but at least to convert it in a way where emergency services could be supported. If we're talking medium term, I think there is funding available through CMHC for organizations like Interval House and other shelters, but it takes a long time to build a new building. So I guess in terms of like what supports could be put in place is just to make those funding pots a little bit more accessible for smaller and medium-sized organizations like Interval House. We're small potatoes. We're not a huge housing developer, and so sometimes the programs. The structure of funding programs are meant for larger developers, and there's a lot of risk that a small organization takes on to access those pots of money. So I guess in terms of like being able for organizations like us to be able to respond to the problem and be part of the solution and to take on these projects where we can build second stage housing or additional shelter spaces, it would just be to create processes that are not as risky for us.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. Ms. Cross, do you have any advice in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term priorities?
We're looking at the legal side of things, and that's the perspective that I bring to this conversation. We've certainly got some short-term possible wins. The recent changes to the Divorce Act, which were followed in Ontario by changes to the Children's Law Reform Act. It would be great to see similar changes made across the country so that we do have a standardized approach to how courts are considering parenting arrangements when the family has had a history of violence. I think that we need to start a discussion soon about what we're going to do about coercively controlling behavior. So I see that as both a short and a medium term. We can start the conversation right away, but I hope that it's enough of a conversation that any outcome of it would be medium term rather than long term. In the longer term, on the law side, I would really like to see us look at a completely different way of addressing intimate partner abuse. The present criminal and family systems really perpetuate systems that keep that violence happening. I've got lots more to say about it, but the chair is telling me it's time to stop, so maybe I can get another question about that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pam. I'm going to now move it over to Adrian. Adrian, you have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would like to thank our two witnesses, Ms. Lewis and Ms. Cross. Thank you so much for helping us with our study on intimate partner violence. My first question is for Ms. Cross. On your organization's website, you state that coercive control is an important issue for domestic violence. The presence of non-violent issues can be worse because it's hard to have people understand how serious it is. And Canada should follow other countries and criminalize coercive behavior. Do you believe that the criminalization of coercive control should be done in Canada? And can you share the experience of other countries that have legislated on this matter?
Our position at Luke's Place is that we need to do a lot more work before we know whether criminalizing coercive control is the right way to go. Your first comments are really important. Coercive control is a hidden kind of abuse within families. It often doesn't include any physical violence at all. And I think, understandably, the typical person who doesn't work in this area, when they think about domestic violence, intimate partner violence, thinks about the slap, the kick, the hit, the push down the stairs. Often coercive control disappears. People think of it as the back and forth, the natural arguments that people in a relationship have with one another. And coercive control is anything but that. Carrie will have seen lots of this at her shelter, and I'm sure would have similar stories to the ones that I'm going to share with you. In a relationship of coercive control, the woman loses her sense of self, her sense of agency. She has very little autonomy because the abuser has created an atmosphere of such fear that she knows she needs to do what he expects of her, or there will be dire consequences. Often the children are brought into that coercive control as weapons. Unwitting, of course, they have no idea the role that they're playing, but the abuser may threaten the woman, I'll take the kids if you leave me. I'll do this to the children if you don't do what I want. Threats to harm pets, financial control, social isolation. It's a long list, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. The issue of what we do about coercive control is very challenging. Women have said, and I've had clients who have said to me, why isn't there a law against that? I call the police and they say there's nothing they can do because he didn't hit me. He didn't kidnap me. He didn't confine me to the home. And they've got a very strong point. On the other hand, to criminalize coercive control means that women potentially could find themselves in situations, women who are victims, improperly charged with that because of manipulation by the abusive spouse. The mandatory charging policies in this country have led to just those kinds of outcomes. Policies that were intended to protect women have ended up being used against them. So when we think about coercive control, we say, let's have a national discussion about this. Let's talk to survivors, victims, frontline workers, police officers, Crown attorneys, family law lawyers, judges, Children's Aid Society representatives. Have a full conversation so that we can hear from many perspectives before we jump to thinking that a particular outcome is the right one.
Madame Cross.
Ms. Cross, you also talked about the criminalization, but that there are other measures that can be taken. This morning, the Justice Minister in Quebec announced the creation of a special tribunal where better support could be offered to victims. And you also talked about electronic control and the e-bracelet. These are part of the report in Quebec, a nonpartisan report of all parties that examined this matter. And you also talked about the pros and cons on electronic devices. What would be the importance of seeing something similar in Ottawa?
Electronic monitoring is really interesting. It certainly offers some obvious benefits. We don't want jails filled to the brim with people who haven't yet been found guilty, and that bail period is often when women are at the greatest risk of a sudden escalation in violence by a former partner. On the other hand, electronic monitoring isn't going to work everywhere in this country until we have a proper telephone system, a proper internet system. I work in communities in Northern Ontario where an electronic bracelet on the abuser would be of absolutely no protection to the woman because there isn't the technological infrastructure in place to let it work. So these things that offer some hope are part of what needs to be a mosaic response. And we really need to look at the whole country. Too often, I think we look at urban areas and areas in the south of the country, and we don't look adequately at whether those particular measures would work in remote and rural parts of Canada.
We're good. Go ahead.
5 secondes. Alors, merci beaucoup.
I only have 5 seconds. Thank you. And my colleague will ask you more questions in the next round.
Well, thank you so much. We're now going to pass it over to Leah. Leah, you've got 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you to both the witnesses for being here today. My first questions are for Carrie Lewis. You spoke about the importance of housing. I would agree with you, and I think, you know, we've seen some investment of housing, I would say grossly inadequate, certainly in places like my riding of Winnipeg Centre, where we've gone through decades of no funding and are experiencing a very serious housing crisis. One of the other areas where there's been huge gaps is not just in housing, but access to low barrier housing, where women can go, diverse gendered people can go where they're at. We still lack those kinds of shelters and, you know, temporary housing in our city. Can you speak to the importance of having low barrier shelters and low barrier housing?
Yes, thank you. So I think it's important that when we approach housing policy that we consider the housing needs of all. So it's not a one size fits all solution. We definitely see a need for low barrier supportive housing. We see the need in the city in our city. So I can speak mostly to Ottawa that there are some folks who come to shelter and they really just need the temporary protection of being in a shelter where there's 24-hour support and security, and then they're ready to move into independent housing. We also see other families who come to us and their needs are so complex and so challenging. There may be mental health, there may be substance use, there may be just really complex like legal situations and safety concerns that require years of support. And so it's important when we think about the types of housing that we're building that we consider the needs of all.
The other thing that you mentioned was the importance or the correlation between poverty and violence in terms of being able to leave violence. I introduced a Bill C-223, in response to this, in fact. In addition to current and future government supports and services, including affordable housing with rent geared to income and all other kinds of supports. Do you think a guaranteed livable basic income based on regional differences, not requiring citizenship, do you think it would be a game changer for helping women and diverse gendered individuals leave violence or have choice to leave violence?
Absolutely. There are many barriers, but as I mentioned in my first comments, lack of deeply affordable housing and lack of a livable income are two of the main barriers that we see. Anyone can experience violence, but for folks who have access to resources, who have high-paying jobs, there are more options available to them and maybe an easier pathway in some regards to leaving abuse. Most of the folks that we serve in shelter, the folks we serve in shelter are varied, but the majority have low incomes, and it reduces the choices they make. So anything that we can do to provide people with a livable income and deeply affordable housing, like truly affordable housing, will allow them an easier path to heal from the abuse that they've experienced.
You, build on what you're talking about, deeply affordable housing. I know that there's been a lot of housing investments into so-called affordable housing. I would argue that it is not affordable housing, which is one of the reasons why I think it's important to push for housing with rent geared to income that is affordable, if it's geared to your income. I'm sure you've seen some of the housing programs coming out. Do you think there is enough focus and funding happening right now to fund deeply affordable housing with the new kind of housing strategies coming out, including the rapid housing strategy?
So I haven't seen the results of the programs that are available right now. These things take time. I do know that some of the projects that I am aware of that are labeled affordable housing are definitely not affordable for the people that we are serving. And I do think that there's a lot of promise in the relatively new pot of funding that's been announced to support shelter spaces and second stage housing. I think that's a really great idea. I think there's some ways to improve that pot of funding to allow, as I said earlier, services like Interval House of Ottawa and other shelters to become part of that solution. We have the experience. We know the barriers that people are facing. We know the types of programs and services that people need and can be attached to housing. So I would just say that I think there's been some good progress made, but just to really think about when we're thinking about funding for rapid housing or for getting these projects done quickly, just to think about who should be delivering those services and to gear that funding to the right folks. And some of those folks are smaller organizations who can't manage the same level of risk that larger developers can.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move it over. We're going to be starting our second round, and that's to 5 minutes to the Conservatives and to the Liberals. Sorry, I have to turn off my alarm clock here. And 2.5 minutes to the NDP and Bloc. So we're going to start our first 5 minutes off with Michelle Freire. Michelle, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair, and two phenomenal witnesses there. Am I having technical problems? You guys went glitchy there for me. Okay, two phenomenal witnesses. And every time I do this committee, I say 6 minutes is definitely not enough to deep dive into a lot of what you are talking about. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Lewis. Great work that you do. Thank you. And what a heartbreaking stat you've shared that 500 women were turned away. That actually made me sick, to be honest with you. And I think that's one of the big things we have to look at in terms of policy. If we're telling people that when they do finally have the courage to ask for help or to flee, but there's nowhere for them to go, what is the incentive to actually leave? So I think that's a really big issue we need to investigate. To your point, I really want to hone in on housing because I think you're absolutely right. It's the baseline for how do we actually help. And ironically, I had a meeting this morning with some of local builders in my riding about supply and demand, and definitely not on the affordable housing end of things. They wouldn't be your clients per se, but they actually touched on a point that I found extremely interesting in that if they can open up supply and demand and get more housing up, they're opening up the opportunity for these more affordable units for your transitional homes, especially for women fleeing. I'm curious to know what your thoughts on that, if you would be supportive of policy that would remove red tape from the federal level that bleeds down to the municipal level on speeding up sort of planning applications so that we can actually get more houses built and focus on this so that we can open up supply and in consequence, lower rent prices.
So I think that housing policies are really important thing. And in some cases, I think it is important to speed up planning processes. So I will just speak about Interval House of Ottawa. We are currently exploring the possibility of building a 10-unit second stage housing development. And in order to be competitive enough in the application process. We need to be far enough along in the actual like pre-development phase to, to be competitive and to be like boots on the ground, ready to go, shovels in the ground, ready. And it's tricky because the municipal processes are complex and take months and months and months and months. So from a policy perspective, what would be helpful for agencies like ours would be that there's some kind of priority given or expedited pathway for social services who are trying to build that deeply affordable housing that is the true need in our community. I don't know that it would be helpful to have that on a broader scale for projects that are not for that deeply affordable housing, because that's definitely not meeting the need that we're seeing in our community. And I'm not talking about just the clients that we serve in shelter, but just generally speaking, most people in the city of Ottawa, whether you're even if you're middle income, even if you're earning $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, you cannot afford the rents in the city and most certainly cannot afford to buy a house. And so I think we need to be prioritizing and creating smoother and quicker pathways solely for those deeply affordable housing projects and less so for the market rent or even what's deemed below market rent, because those are not obtainable, those are not feasible options for most people in our community.
Yeah, the average house price right now is $868,000, and I can tell you I can't even fathom that if I was a young person. And so yeah, there's a lot to unpack there in terms of helping. Curious, really quickly, if you've ever thought about a business model or would be open to your agency. I know the YWCA out in Vancouver actually has a model where they're profiting, like they've built to try and help subsidize themselves to be a little more self-sufficient. Have you ever looked into a model like that, or would you be open to something like that?
Yeah, I think it's like a mixed model of housing where you have some market rent units and some sort of below market rent and some deeply affordable rent all in the same building. And I think those are great models, probably beyond the scale of what we could manage as a smaller organization. But I think those models are really creative and can do a lot of good to create self-sustaining housing for a variety of folks. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Okay, so I'll be super, super quick. Pamela, I just wanted to touch on the fact that I love your comments about the mosaic. It's critical. And I'm wondering if there's any way you could table for the committee. You talked about the pros and the cons. If you could put that into writing so that we could see it for the committee, because I know that it's a bigger conversation, but what doesn't work versus what does work. And I always find it's easier to find a direction to go when we know what couldn't work, if you'd be interested in doing that.
Happy to do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And we're now going to move it over to Pam. Pam Demoff, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And it's absolutely wonderful to be here at Status of Women Committee today, especially when I saw who the witnesses were. Thank you to both of you for your work. And Pamela Cross, your reputation and the work that you've done with people that I know is very, very, very much appreciated. You mentioned in your opening remarks about judicial education, so I would like to talk about Kira's Law. A little 4-year-old girl who had her life in front of her died because the courts felt that even though her mother Jennifer had been subjected to domestic violence, which the courts acknowledged, and acknowledged that her ex-husband had lied to the courts, still allowed little Kira to spend time with him. And as a result, she died in a murder-suicide. And then in my area as well is the case of Darian Henderson Bellman, which I know you're also familiar with, where the man who killed her had breached conditions 4 times. And the last time that a judge released him to house arrest, he was caught with possession of a loaded firearm and drugs. I wonder if you could, there is a private member's bill right now that's coming up, Bill C-233, which includes Kira's Law, which speaks to judicial education for domestic violence and coercive control. Could you just speak a little bit about the importance of that and where the gaps are?
The gaps are huge. And they're everywhere, to be perfectly frank with you. We have an important constitutional principle in Canada about judicial autonomy and independence. And I think that's part of the reason that we haven't progressed in terms of judicial education when it comes to social policy issues like intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and so on. But it's time to find a way to get around that barrier. We don't expect the dentist when we go to see them to not have up to the minute training, education, and access to information to perform a checkup on our mouth. It's the same thing when we go to the hospital. We expect the professionals we're turning to know what they need to know to do the job. And yet, when it comes to cases that involve intimate partner violence, women who turn to family court or criminal court are not getting that level of expertise. Sometimes they're not getting that level of expertise from their lawyer because there is almost no education about intimate partner violence in law schools. So yeah, we need to educate judges, not to make them biased, but to make them understand that this is a phenomenon that happens in a significant number of families in Canada. We need lawyers to have access to ongoing professional development opportunities that are mandatory, frankly. We need to include it in law school curriculum. So it's something that anyone who says they're going to be a lawyer has at least a base level of education and awareness about. But then, as I said in my comments, we need to take that a step farther. I've done a lot of training and education. And I'll be frank with you, I have no idea whether the people sitting in the room are listening to me or making a grocery list or thinking about what they're going to do when they get home or nowadays playing Wordle. There's no way for me to know whether anything I've said has sunk in. So in addition to education and training, we have to build accountability systems so that when that individual goes back to their workplace, their regular performance reviews include an examination of whether they've been applying what they should have learned in the training session that they were at. Until every actor in both the criminal and legal and family legal systems have a fulsome understanding of the reality of violence in families, the prevalence of it, the fact that it doesn't end at separation, the fact that there are many fathers, like Kira's father, who use the child, weaponize the child to get back at their partner. We are going to continue to see shelters that are turning away 500 women and children a year. We are going to continue to see women and children being killed in this country. It seems obvious, I think, probably to all of us in this meeting this afternoon. So let's go out of here and say we've got to find a way to make sure that the professionals understand what they're talking about.
That's almost perfect timing because I've only got 15 seconds left. That bill will be coming to this committee, so I look forward to debate and hopefully support for it when it comes here. Thank you very much, Chair.
Absolutely, and thank you very much, Pam, for those really, really important questions. Sorry, once again, Maxime, congratulations and welcome to our committee today.
Merci
you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to say hello to my colleagues, and I'm pleased to replace my colleague here at the Standing Committee of the Status of Women. We are examining a very important topic today. I would like to come back to what my colleague had asked, Ms. Cross. You talked about the importance of coercive control in domestic violence, and I would like to come back to the criminalization of coercive control, which we believe would be an important tool, but it should, of course, come with other tools, for example, training for professionals and for the public, and I would like to come back to those measures. Do you believe that such measures would would reduce the impacts of that with having criminalization and other tools?
I'm going to answer your question in a slightly different way to say that without those additional elements, any criminalization of coercive control would not work. I think we need to still do a little more thinking to make sure we have everything in place before we move to thinking that criminalization is the way to go. So it's a sort of half yes is my response to your question. And that's certainly been the experience in jurisdictions that have criminalized coercive control. In the places where a huge amount of money was dedicated to the kinds of programs and accountability and training that you've talked about, criminalization has worked better than in those jurisdictions where those measures were not in place and where funding wasn't available. It's also the case that it's been the most successful in jurisdictions where there's been a high level of consultation with survivors and with those who work with survivors.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Cross.
Thank you, Ms. Cross. Would you have anything to add with regards to the implementation of the special tribunal in Quebec?
I think that something like that tribunal, again, it's an important piece of this mosaic or quilt approach that we need to meaningfully address violence that happens within families. Specialization is critical because, as the comments I made earlier indicate, the professionals who are in front of criminal courts and family courts generally are generalists. They don't know enough about this. So specialization, really important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're going to pass, thank you. We're going to now pass it over to Leah. Leah, 2.5.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the witnesses today. My question is for Pamela Cross. I know that you had chaired the Justice and Legal Systems Working Group, and one of the recommendations by the working group was to improve immigration pathways that protect vulnerable immigrant women from precarious living conditions, exploitation, and abuse by ensuring status for all, something that I'm a big supporter of, immigration status for all, and prioritize permanent residency for survivors of JBV in Canada. I'm wondering if you could expand on the impact of status for all in addressing gender-based violence.
When a woman comes to Canada and doesn't have stable status in the country, it places her at ongoing jeopardy if she's in a relationship where her partner's abusing her, or of even entering a relationship where she will be abused, because she's in this sort of holding pattern here until her status here is determined, until she knows that she can stay. She has difficulty with things like employment. She may even have difficulty with housing. The children are going to feel, if there are children, as though they're not in a stable situation. So whether she's coming here to flee an abusive relationship in her country of origin, or whether she's here and the abusive relationship is also here, stabilizing her legal status in Canada, it's sort of like housing in the way that Carrie talked about so eloquently earlier. Without some of these foundational pieces of stability, women are living in situations that just expose them to more abuse and that make it much more difficult for them to move past that trauma.
Okay, and just building on that, we know that women are most often responsible for unpaid care work, looking after children, parents, family members. Another important argument for a guaranteed livable basic income. Do you think a guaranteed livable basic income, in addition to current and future programs and support, including housing with rent geared to income, do you think that it would assist women to flee violence?
Absolutely.
With the permission of the committee, I was wondering if the chair can ask a few questions. Anyone saying nay? Everybody's okay with that? So we have a couple minutes left, and rather than trying to go the entire round, thank you so much to both of you for being on this today. It's really important that we have these discussions. I would like to start with Pamela, if you don't mind, because I think one thing we talk about is intergenerational trauma. And for me, it's where do we nip it in the bud? And I really focus on youth. What are some of the things that you have seen that may be great, whether it comes to education or programs that may help with getting rid of or trying to go away from having violence against women? What type of programs do you think are necessary for our youth when it comes to this type of behavior?
I agree with you, absolutely, that we need to nip this in the bud. We need to be raising children who, from very early in their lives, understand that conflict resolution doesn't have to mean one person wins and another person loses, that happy relationships are where two people have a relatively equal balance of power and so on. I don't know why we're not talking about this from daycare up. It seems to be a forbidden topic, as though talking about it is going to make it happen. But in fact, talking about it is going to stop it from happening. It's great to get kids into programming once the fact that their family has violence in it has come to the surface. But let's do this. Let's bring in the experts. Let's bring in counselors from shelters, counselors from sexual assault centers, and others to talk with children as young as 3 and 4 about what a happy, healthy relationship looks like, and to give them the skills they need to engage in that kind of a relationship themselves.
And carrying on with that, Carrie, I just would love to hear comments on that as well. And this will be my last question, but to Carrie, can you just expand on what your thoughts are on that when it comes to education and trying to prevent this right from the very beginning?
I would agree with everything that Pamela has said. It goes back to this idea of, in order to prevent violence and respond to violence appropriately, we need all systems understanding the dynamics of violence and abuse. And I think there's been some progress made in terms of school curriculums. There's like small sections now on healthy relationships, but again, it, like Pamela said, it starts later on, you know, in grade 7, 8, 9, 10. I think we could be having conversations with younger kids in preschools and giving them those skills to talk about their feelings, giving them the words that they need to describe anger and what to do with that anger and what some of the options are, and teaching them the concept of power in relationships and privilege in relationships. These are all things that kids can understand. I have 4 kids myself, and we've been talking about these things since they were young. They get it. They're so smart. They should be here talking to you. Kids are amazing, and I think that it is really important that we turn some of our attention to that prevention work and getting kids at younger and younger ages to understand these issues and concepts.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for both taking the time to answer my questions as well. On behalf of the Status of Women Committee, I'd like to thank you both for coming here and giving your testimony today. We wish you all the best, and if there is any additional information or documentation that you can send our way that would benefit, perhaps you may see a program that's really beneficial that you say, hey, I think the ladies at sorry about that, Maxime and Mark. I think the people at Status of Women need to see this. So if you could send anything on, that would be wonderful. What we're going to do now is going to suspend the committee just for a couple minutes and get started once again at 2, but we're just going to get the second panel on. And once again, to Carrie and Pamela, thank you so much for being part of this important study. Thank you. Suspending. To our second panel. I would really like to welcome our guests today on our second panel for our important study on intimate partner violence. From the Moose Hide campaign, we have David Stevenson, who is the Président Directeur Général. Paul Lessert, who is trying to still get on, who is co-founder et ambassadeur national. And the Wood Green Services Communautaire, Jordanka Protrova, who is Directrice Principale
Senior Manager, Homeward Bound Program.
Thank you. For the opening statements, you each get 5 minutes. When you see me start swirling my arm in the air, if you could just start winding up, that'd be wonderful. But I'm going to pass the floor over right now to David Stevenson. David, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement. David, you're on mute, so you'll just have to unmute, and then we'd love to hear what you have to say. On the screen, if you go to the bottom corner, you'll find the mute button there. Fantastic. Looking good.
How about that? Can you hear me?
Perfection. Go ahead. 5 minutes.
Okay, you can hear me? Thank you. I'm not sure if Paul will join, but if he does join, you'll hear from him as well. But my name is David Stevenson. I'm calling in from the Lekwungen-speaking People's Territory here on Vancouver Island. And it's an honor to be here. Sego to everybody, and thanks for inviting us to say a few words. I'm the CEO of the Moose Hide campaign, which is a campaign that started along the Highway of Tears in 2011. Paul, who will join us in a minute, and his daughter Raven were hunting along that highway. It's their traditional territory. Their ancestors have hunted there for thousands of years. And when they got a moose, as they have done every year, they were inspired to take the hide of that moose and tan it and cut it up and offer it to friends in their and relatives in their community to say, if you wear this hide, you promise to not do violence against any women and children in your community, to honor, respect, and protect all women in your life and in your network. This was, of course, prior to the real awareness of the MMIWG issues that have Canada's been plagued with. This is before Me Too movement and really before reconciliation, the TRC and the reconciliation got going. I'd like to point out that this was a moment that Canada needs to stop and think about. Here is an Indigenous father transitioning his knowledge and wisdom and his traditions and his language to his daughter. And that was the exact moment that the residential school systems were designed to disrupt and to eradicate, was the transition of culture from one generation to the next. That moment is also a moment when we see the power of culture and the power of the use of our collective ability to come together in cultures and design cultures and keep cultures alive and create new cultures. And that's what the campaign is about. It's very much about a focus on using Indigenous, it's an Indigenous medicine, we like to say, for the benefit of all Canadians, and specifically for a very deep and troubling social illness and spiritual illness that Canadians suffer. And that's the illness of the confusion that violence is somehow a way to achieve some kind of goal. Men are brought up in a culture in Canada and in many places in the world where it is not obvious that you do not physically harm women and children. As a matter of fact, many men are brought up to think that that is one of the tools in their tool belt of how to move forward in life and how to achieve whatever it is they're looking to achieve. So the Moose Hide campaign started at that moment as a call to action for all Canadians to stand together and draw a line in the sand. There was a time in Canada when drinking and driving was kind of okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay. We didn't worry about it too much. And there was a big gray zone there. And if you got pulled over, you might get sent home or something like that. And then Canada decided, no, that's offside. And that's not something that we're going to achieve through the current tools of government. There's no laws or policy that somebody's going to write that's going to all of a sudden end violence against women and children in this country. What there is the moral leadership. And then so we ask for that in our engagement with government and all Canadians. And that's not necessarily the tools of government, but it's the leadership of government to say this is an issue that is a priority to us. It's an issue that we want to focus on and take a stand. against visibly. We believe this is an issue like all burdensome psychological issues. It can't be left in the dark. We hope that this campaign shines a light into that darkness, and that we creates the social connectivity and the social expectation that we conduct ourselves, and men hold themselves accountable and each other accountable for a standard of interaction that they would like to see with their own daughters and their own mothers and their own sisters, and themselves. And it's a result of a lot of confusion and a lot of yet to be developed expectations. So I was glad to hear folks talking about youth. We have our Moosehide Campaign Day, which is a virtual celebration, will be on May 12th this year. We invite each and every one of you to join that event and all of your network. We have about 250,000 people signed up. Close to 200,000 of them are in the K-12 system to come and watch the day. We have the Governor General saying some words and Murray Sinclair saying some words. What we're trying to do is surface this issue above just another issue amongst issues. It's not just a good idea that we work together to end violence against women and children. It's completely preventable. It's an experience that we need to, and a set of values we need to walk and talk. And so we hold this day as a day of ceremony. We invite men and boys to fast with us for the day, so we get beyond this. It's a good idea, and yes, I feel this is the right thing to do, to, I've actually got to deepen into my personal experience and my personal commitment to take a stand, because I don't believe we believe that this is a muscle that has been atrophied, if ever it existed, and it's muscle we can collectively build together. It's not everything. It's not going to solve all problems, but it's enough to say we collectively stand together on this issue. And it's not simply a virtual signal, and it's not a badge of honor. It's a badge of our collective inability to provide a safe country for all Canadians. And so that's the work of the campaign. Happy to talk about any other aspects of it that you would be interested in.
Thank you so much. And we're now going to move it over to Jordanka. And please correct me if I'm saying it incorrect. Jordanka, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. It's absolutely correct. My name is Jordanka, and I'm the Senior Manager of Food Green Community Services Homeward Bound Program. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women for this invitation to address your study. Food Green Community Services is one of Toronto's largest social service agencies, serving 37,000 people each year across 40 locations. As a leader in social innovation, we appreciate the focus of your study. Intimate partner in domestic violence is a social problem with structural roots such as gender inequality, fear of retribution, accepting the emotional, psychological, and physical abuse by the partner due to normalization of male superiority by our society. Pathways to gain economic independence through advancing women's education is often complicated by issues such as lack of affordable housing, low childcare availability and affordability, and the need to access loans in order to pay for a post-secondary education, which automatically leads to incurring debt. Intimate partner and domestic violence experienced by women and girls is attributed to a wide range of financial and social structural barriers. Thus, efforts need to be coordinated and focused on bridging the gaps between the siloed systems. Wood Green Community Services Homeward Bound program is a program model that eliminates barriers preventing women from living unsafe environments. It's launched in 2004, and it's first of its kind in Canada. Homeward Bound program provides homeless or inadequately housed single mothers, approximately 80% of whom have experienced violence, access to a 4-year transitional housing, childcare, mental health and family counseling, post-secondary education, sustainable employment with the help of our industry council. Coming from a variety of backgrounds and experiences, the women we have are united in hope for a better future. They work hard to pave their path to sustainable employment, permanent housing, and a positive violence-free future for themselves and for their children. Included in our materials is a reference to an external study which details the impact of the Homeward Bound program in numbers, one of which is social return on investment, that for every dollar invested in Homeward Bound, approximately $6 are created in social and economic value. Also, 94% of the program graduates are stably housed upon completion. Employment rate shifts from 6% upon entry to 87% within 5 years after graduation. Old Green shares this model through affiliate partnerships, as in the case with Peterborough, Halton Region, and Brantford. We also have worked with the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres to share learnings and adapt with Indigenous cultural considerations. Old Green Community Services supports policy, partnership, and initiatives that will strive to empower vulnerable women and address intimate partner and domestic violence in Canada. And based on our extensive experience with traumatized women and children, we'd like to put forward some recommendations as follows. Core and operating funding to support longer-term programs with wraparound supports focused on addressing the systemic, financial, and social structural barriers experienced by women and girls fleeing domestic violence. Financial support for longer-term affordable and independent housing opportunities available to women and girls fleeing domestic violence versus temporary solutions, often through the shelter system. Procedural improvements in the family court system when going through divorce, child custody, access, child spousal support with stress on proper resourcing of more effective legal representation to avoid re-traumatization and further abuse. And as a preventative measure, focus on the perpetrators versus those on the violence receiving end, support with research recommendations and evidence-based approaches regarding educational and intervention practices. Thank you so much for your attention and for this opportunity to address you today.
Thank you both for your opening statements. What we're going to be doing is starting our first round of questions. Each party will receive 6 minutes. So we're going to start off with 6 minutes with Michelle Ferry. Michelle, you have the floor for 6.
Thank you so much. Thank you to both of our witnesses today for being here. Really appreciate your time on a Friday. And I think you need to send us those lovely little pins so we can wear them in Parliament on May 12th. I just wanted to quickly ask, make sure I have your name correct, Jordanka. Can you clarify where in Peterborough, that's actually my riding, where in Peterborough you're helping with?
It's in partnership with Peterborough Housing Corporation.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, they have a building. I'm not familiar with the address in particular, but it's part of their housing fund.
Fantastic. Thanks for clarifying that. I'll come back to you in just a sec. I wanted to go back to David, if I can. And David, I find what you're doing really interesting, and to point out that it's not virtue signaling, but as one of my favorite quotes by Mr. Rogers is, anything mentionable is manageable. So when we start to talk about it, right, education equals awareness equals change. I'm curious though about what the next steps are. I like that you're starting this dialogue and this conversation. And if you could clarify again, what age group are you starting at? And again, to clarify, particularly men and boys, correct?
Yeah, so thank you. So definitely a focus on men and boys. We invite every Canadian from all along the gender continuum to participate in all aspects of the campaign and all cultures. But it is an Indigenous focused innovation for the benefit of all Canadians. And for the so we work with we have a team, two people working on our K to 12. So they
K to 12.
K to 12, yeah. So we have K to 12. We also have quite an active sort of ground game right now in post-secondary institutions.
Fantastic.
And then we work with, we see this as systems change. So we work with large institutions. As a matter of fact, Indigenous Services Canada has just seconded an individual to our team who will then go across departments and agencies and try and bring the message out to folks to be able to join. And on the day, we actually have some capacity building, like it's a day where we'll have the event and some capacity building live interactive workshops so people can actually use it as a professional development opportunity.
Thank you for that. I think what's interesting, and I'm curious to know how you integrate this if you have people with lived experience, because I like what you talked about at the beginning, where in some families it is the normal base. I like how you use the drinking and driving example, where in some areas, especially more perhaps rural or cut off areas from our country, perhaps that is the social norm, that's how you deal with it. So I'm curious where you're directing men. So, sometimes when we open up these conversations, it can open up a wound of, wow, I'm actually one of these people contributing to this. I didn't realize how damaging my behavior is, and that I was just doing what I was taught. Where are you directing them, or what resources do you have to help them sort of go on a journey to correct it and unlearn that behavior?
Yeah, great question. So I think you might have asked, or I'm going to answer a question you may or may not have asked, and then directly that one. But we do have a Wise Aunties Council, who are women, most of whom have experienced some very significant, a lot of depth, if you will, of experience in this field, and will guide us and make sure we're staying. We are very consciously saying this is an issue where men need to show up and support. And not jump in front of a parade here, or we have to be very cautious to make sure that we're supporting a larger conversation across Canada. As far as men's resources there, what we do is if we are working, so we specifically try and work with larger organizations if we can, so that we put our effort into that, and then we ask that organization. So for instance, the federal government, okay, if we're going to, what are the supports that you as an institution have in place before we start this journey of asking you to raise this and show executive profile and have,
Sorry, I hate cutting people off.
Yeah,
We're always
fine.
in a rush. We're always in this rush. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is what support systems, because I love that you've recognized that you need to have them in place before you open up the conversation.
Absolutely.
What's working? What programs do you find are actually working when they have this kind of, wow, I need help?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot of them. There are very specific ones. There's ones like Warriors Against Violence in Vancouver, and the Change of Seasons programs in Vancouver, which are often for adjudicated folks. But there is not like a cadre of programs and services sort of at the ready. Often folks will, what we find is guys who will go, oh, this is something I need to think about more. That first step, there's a lot of capacity, I think, for people to just get there. And then once they're there, they're going, okay. And then they will, there's lots of supports in communities. I find men will hold each other and support each other in these conversations.
Yeah, navigating the system is often the hardest part. And I guess from where we sit on a federal level, I think what your work is extremely important, because you have to get to that point. You don't know what you don't know. And I think your campaign is critical to get to that point. I guess what I'm looking at, and to hammer out from you, if I could, what kind of program do you think, could be in place to help these men? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So, and again, I'll go back to for our work in Indigenous communities and I don't do this through the campaign itself, but I used to work in this field. So very specifically programs that are designed and root for Indigenous men and boys. It seems to be very culturally based, locally based, rooted programs and services, and really initiatives to bring them back to their culture, bring them back to a inner sense of agency and purpose is really critical. And then we've found that just straight up counseling, just men being able to turn the dial a bit and go, oh, wait a second, there's other behaviors I can do. Oh, there's other things. These emotions can go in different directions. Those kinds of basic understandings are really important. And so I would say, again, going back to any organization.
Excuse me, sir. I'm going to have to cut you off, because the fact is we do have to go around.
Apologies.
I do want to welcome Mr. Lacerte to our panel as well. He is here with Moose Hide as well, so he's just been able to join us. I'm just going to make mention, I don't know if you received your headset or not. That should have been received. Did you receive that by any chance?
Yeah, I received it, but I don't have a way to connect it to my system, unfortunately. So if this sound works okay for you folks.
We will do our best, and I will just, if there's any problems, I'll let you know. But I just wanted to check in on that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to switch it over to Emanuela Lambropoulos. Emanuela, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being with us today to answer some of our questions on this really important topic. I'm going to begin with Ms. Petrova. Ms. Petrova, you spoke a lot about the financial and the social barriers that exist that block women from escaping violence in their homes. And you also mentioned a couple of the recommendations that you want our government to really look into. And this is the perfect place to be able to do that because that's what we're after, recommendations. So I'm going to give you an opportunity maybe to elaborate a little bit more on the 4 that you named, whether it's addressing the systemic financial barriers, if you can be a little bit more specific as to how we can do that. And then at the end, you mentioned focus on perpetrator rather than victim. If you can go a little bit more into detail on that one as well.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Really, I'm here to present the Homeward Bound program as a really a good example and a model that addresses those both social and financial structural barriers. I think previous witnesses have recognized that it's never one faceted problem when it comes to violence, partner violence, and there are multiple issues that women and girls fleeing those violent situations face. And if in the community there are no tools that they can turn and feel that they trust that they can actually flee the violence and feel safe, they wouldn't be actually leaving the relationships or the environment that they currently live. In general, like if you are a woman experiencing abuse and you'd like to move on with your life, like first, it's never only it's not just emotional, it's economic, sometimes physical, like different types of abuse that women are experiencing. And if they're economically dependent, first thing they need to consider is when moving out of the relationship is finding affordable housing. And I know previous witnesses talked about like the difficulty in locating affordable housing nowadays. And that's why the program we try to tackle those issues. That's why one of the recommendations, if I can explore and expand a little bit more, is core funding for those comprehensive model programs that address not just providing immediate shelter to flee the abusive and violent situation, but also to provide opportunities that this person can actually tackle that are barriers, like improve their education, have a more permanent housing for themselves, and if their children involved in particular, even more, as well as employment opportunities, not just survival jobs, but like opportunities that will provide them with economic self-sufficiency. So really, that's kind of like the recommendation, looking at holistically at the situation, because those women usually don't face only one barrier. It's not just the one silo type of problem. And
I guess I have another question. Yeah. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it, but if you can, then let me know. Women who, we heard on the previous panel that many women are often turned away when they do seek help and when they get to a shelter. There's not enough space available. And this can be very dangerous for these women because they're already taking a huge risk in leaving. And these men who are, depending on the situation, it could be a very dangerous one, and it could be a matter of life or death. And oftentimes they're turned away with nowhere to go. And this also has a lot to do with coercive control. There's a lot of things that cannot necessarily be proven even when things do happen. When it's not physical abuse and there are no bruises on the body or there's no way of proving the abuse, oftentimes it's very difficult for a woman to actually go seek help with the police or with anybody. So do you have any thoughts on that? Do you have any recommendations on how we can make it so that women are empowered in a way where they're believed and where they're actually given tools that don't work against them in the end?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very difficult and complicated situation because on one side they're fleeing a controlled environment, and with even though one problem is shelters do not have sufficient space in terms of really giving a safe environment for all women that need on one side. And on the other, it's like the setting in the shelter system is like limited space, shared space. So it's moving from one almost controlled curfews and so on and so forth. And we're talking about like a woman that has experienced like a lot of trauma and is needs just the space to recover and to regroup from what those experiences are. That's why actually many of them return to the relationship, because they do have a shelter, but they don't have the economic supports. They don't have any sort of ideas what they do next, or where they go next, what they turn. So resolution, I'm not sure if there is a really very fast type of resolution, but opportunities to that's why the second recommendation, longer term affordable independent housing for those women and girls that experience domestic violence would be a first step as a resolution, and then providing them with the necessary supports in place to either progress their education, complete post-secondary, and have linkages to the labor market or employers so they can secure employment to be financially independent.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We're now going to turn it over. It looks like Maxime. Maxime, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to start by thanking the witnesses for being with us this afternoon. My first questions are for Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Lacerte. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, first and foremost, for your presentation. I would like to share some information. According to the Institution of Public Health in Quebec, Indigenous women are at higher risk of being victims of domestic violence than non-Indigenous women. They are also overrepresented in homicides by their partners. Is there a reason why violence against Indigenous women is more frequent and more serious?
I'll offer Paul if you'd like to say something.
Greetings. My sincere apologies. No disrespect intended to the committee for arriving late due to technical barriers with my system here. So my apologies, and thank you to the staff for their support. And I would say first, as a father of 4 visibly Indigenous women. And of First Nations, and as a First Nations man that grew up right along the Highway of Tears. The Highway of Tears runs right through our Carrier First Nations territory. That the statement and the statistics that you cite are that is the lived experience of Indigenous women in this country, and for those of us with visibly Indigenous women in our families know that those statistics don't just apply to women who are vulnerable, Indigenous women that are vulnerable or have high risk lifestyles, and so the question that you raise of sort of the why, I think has some deep roots at an institutional level in this country. The presence of systemic racism and statutory racism that has affected and specifically displaced Indigenous women and disrupted the matriarchal systems that we had in place. That persists today in every system, as you know. For example, that in the month of January, the percentage of incarcerated women in Canada that are Indigenous exceeded 50% for the first time. And so we have indicators that are going in the wrong direction to show how incredibly marginalized and unsafe and unsupported Indigenous women are in relation to other women, and certainly in relationship to Canadians writ large. So these challenges that result in our women being murdered and being abducted and going missing are intergenerational, they're systemic, they're statutory and regulatory, and includes, and you know, one of my late recommendations here, it includes, you know, systemic barriers inside our policing systems, including within the RCMP, for Indigenous women to be seen through a lens of respect and equality, and not to be seen through this narrative that they are less than, and or often intoxicated, and or not to be trusted, and not to be taken at their word, you know, to the previous speaker's comments. So part of our theory of change in those broad contexts is simple. It's to increase ceremony in whatever way makes sense for those systems, and to call forward.
Monsieur Lacerda, je vais devoir vous interrompre pour...
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you to continue with my questions. Please don't hesitate to send in additional briefs if you have any additional information. With regards to access to resources, this is a very important issue. Indigenous women face many challenges. There's a lack of resources for Indigenous women throughout the country, and this was made worse during the pandemic. Can you describe some of the situations that Indigenous women face with intimate partners and with domestic violence when they try to have access to services, which is different throughout the country?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the first is the nature of our communities, and so you know, for Indigenous women that are living in First Nations on reserve communities, there is an incredible absence of most of the services, as you've heard, that are already stretched, that are available to folks that are in urban communities, and so an absolute either absence or an extreme limit in terms of residential services and protective services for Indigenous women living on reserve. Leaving is a really challenging prospect for a lot of Indigenous women who are in vulnerable positions in their home community, because it means leaving their extended family. And an extended family is a core value and something that is a very high priority for Indigenous women. And it means leaving their home and often leaving their kids, leaving access to elders, etc. So those are some unique challenges. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move it over for the next 6 minutes to Leah Gazan. Leah, you have 6.
Thank you so much, Chair. My first question is to Paul Lacerda. You spoke, you know, a little bit about the impact of colonial policies briefly, in terms of the impact it's had on violence against women, girls, and I would say diverse gendered individuals. I would say most notably the Indian Act, which really usurped the traditional roles of women as matriarch, but also impacted the understanding of traditional roles of men, which were to be the protectors of women. Distorting that sacred role and responsibility, something that I think the Moose Hide campaign is trying to champion to get back. But I'd also argue, as you've mentioned, I think part of the issue when you're talking about Indigenous women is the normalized violence and hypersexualization of Indigenous women and girls, whether it's through media, certainly Disney in their betrayal of Pocahontas, and this wonderful romance with John Smith, not noting that she was a 13-year-old girl that was married off to this old dirty guy, and that kind of romanticized understanding of Indigenous women. One only has to think about October and Halloween, where we have to see things like costumes that are called the sexy squaw, to really understand how very vile and deeply rooted that normalization of hypersexualization and violence is. How is the Moose Hide campaign helping to address that?
That's an incredibly complex question, and I would point to two things. One is, our effort in the decolonization and reculturalization space as a lens through which we engage community and design strategy. And one really good example is a practice that was displaced is a coming of age ceremony. And so part of what we're supporting at a community level, and in fact, Mr. Stevenson may have spoken to this in our kindergarten to grade 12 process, is you get into those earlier opportunities for intervention in the adolescent window where, young people, young folks along the gender continuum and male and female are hardwired for reprogramming. And to understand the effects for themselves of early childhood trauma, we're in an environment where unhealed early childhood trauma is really prevailing in our communities, and again applying this cultural lens and a ceremonial lens. A good example in that very broad question is to support practices of coming of age ceremonies, so that the code of conduct that you have as a man, your accountability to the men in the community, that integrative community capacity build is really accelerated when we bring those kinds of practices back into place. There is no panacea in this space. This is about culture change, and it's about shifting our generational thinking so that the devastating effect of these attitudes and perceptions of Indigenous women that have been accelerated by Hollywood, but also have been accelerated by the prevailing attitudes inside Canadian institutions, the judiciary, the police system,
just because we have a limited time, and I would say that kind of behavior is even demonstrated within our institutions, including the House of Commons by men, and in saying that, you talked about, culture change. Would you say that the reclamation of culture in terms of men's traditional roles and responsibilities is helping shift the narrative around violence with particularly young Indigenous men? I think about my community where young Indigenous men are holding circles, holding each other to account to say, we want to end misogyny. We want to take back our sacred role and responsibility. Mm-hmm. Do you think that reclamation of culture is actually the best strategy to mitigate against the violence crisis?
I think the answer is absolutely yes, and not just in Indigenous communities. I think the reciprocity in the reconciliation space is allowing us to export simple practices like men sitting in circle with each other, creating safety to be able to talk through the healing and support each other through peer support and peer accountability. So culture is absolutely paramount in Indigenous communities, and I think it creates a level of encouragement in non-Indigenous communities. And why that's important for me is that there's a spiritual component inside Indigenous culture. And I can tell you that the scourge of sexualized violence against children in this country and the unhealed trauma that adults are carrying as a result of having suffered sexualized violence, and so many people in our own communities have that's part of our story, that causes spiritual trauma, and culture helps to, I think, the healing that we need so that our behavior changes. The way that culture supports that and enables that is that there is a spiritual component, and we have some spiritual healing that we have to do if we're going to, reach for our higher selves, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're now going to go into our second round. It starts with the first 5 minutes with Shelby Cramp-Nyman. Shelby, you've got the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Hear you fine. If there's problems, we will let you know for sure.
Fantastic. So first of all, thank you very much for all of you for coming forward and sharing some of your stories. I'd like to address initially Mr. Stevenson. I would certainly applaud you you made some comments with regards to moral leadership, and I can't speak of that enough.
Shelby, I have to interrupt you. If you could move your microphone maybe a little bit down. It is very muffled right now, so it perhaps may be too close, or maybe pull it out a little bit if you don't mind. Ooh, pull out that whisker of your thing. Yep, let's try that one again, okay?
How's that?
Well, we don't know yet. Just talk a couple seconds.
Okay. I'll just continue talking to Dr. Stevenson.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Stevenson, I was just applauding you for your comments with regards to your moral. You spoke of the moral leadership, and I'm just checking.
Shelby, sorry about this. We're having a problem with translation. It may be the internet service. It may be something like that. Just one. Yeah. Move the mic again. Yeah.
Ms. Cramp-Nyman, if you could just pull away your microphone. Yeah, it is flexible, so don't be afraid of yeah. And maybe we could try.
How's that? Okay.
Let us just try.
Mr. Stevenson, I'm going to be applauding. Perhaps just to respect all the witnesses' time, I'd be happy to pass my time to someone that has better service, whether it's Michelle or Dominique, should they wish, just to respect all the witnesses' time.
Okay.
I'm happy to take it if need be.
We'll just switch right over to Michelle. Thank you very much, Shelby, and I'm sorry about that. We're going to pass it over to Michelle. Shelby, you have 3 minutes and 53 seconds left, Shelby.
Thank you so much. And I know my colleague would ask fantastic questions, so I'll try and channel my inner Shelby to do these questions. I actually, you guys have been wonderful and learning lots, quite frankly, to be honest with you. But I'm going to turn it back over to Jordanka. And Jordanka, I'd love to hear you expand on the Homeward Bound program. I myself am a big ambassador of it here in my riding of Peterborough Kawartha, and I've seen the life changes that it has made for women. And I'm just wondering if you could speak on why you think it works, and if you'd love to see it as a national standard program offered from a federal level.
Fantastic opportunity. Thank you so much for, I'm always passionate to talk about the Homeward Bound program. I've been since 2008 with the programs, and I've witnessed amazing transformations of women who went through the program. As I said, majority of them coming from the shelter system, and upon their leaving the program, we have usually their graduation, very formal event, a talk as valedictorians. It's just giving me goosebumps, and that's what keeps my motivation. So really the Homeward Bound program is, as I said, we're fortunate. Wood Green is fortunate of having so many services at one place, having the housing, having employment supports, in addition to childcare centers. The agency has 6. One is particularly for the Homeward Bound participants. Yep. Do you have clarification?
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to be so quick, because what I think is so great about it is the fact that it actually staggers and has this ladder in time to educate the woman so that she makes a sustainable income. It's not just for transition. And I don't know if you want to talk about that in terms of the education aspect, so she can afford rent or afford to be a homeowner.
Exactly. So that's really the goal of the program, both education and employment. We do sponsor 2-year college diplomas, so they gain their education with one of the community colleges in Toronto. But it's not just the random programs. It's programs connected to the labor market. And that's where the strength of the program is, having those relationships with corporate partners. We have quite a few on our list, and they secure internships and support with employment. And we're not talking survival jobs, we're talking employment that lead to careers.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to jump in because I think it's important to have it on the record when you're saying that even in the trades, which is, skilled trades, and, attracting those women and helping with that gender disparity. And also just like we have such a shortage of skilled trades, this program really checks all those boxes. Sorry, I get so excited about it too. So keep going.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, absolutely. So it's kind of like work backwards. So we first explore what are the labor market opportunities, and all the programs we do sponsor are consulted by our industry council partners, by the employers that will be providing the internships and the employment. As I said, we work with mostly corporate partners, so there are lots of opportunities for them to grow. We have, based on this study, and that will be attached to our notes that we'll be sending, we have those who are housed within 5 years, 8% of them can afford buying a home, which I think is fantastic. I think it's just incredible. I want to just mention, I didn't talk about this, but we also work closely with builders to provide affordable housing opportunities upon leaving the program. And we've had 2 opportunities, 10 units 3 years ago, and we were able to secure 35 units within a huge building, mixed rental arrangements for exiting participants. But the amount of calls we were getting—
I do have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. We're just getting tight on time, and I know everybody has lots of questions for you. So I'm going to pass this over to Jenna Sutz. Jenna, you have the floor for 5.
Terrific, thank you. And perhaps I'll give you an opportunity here, Jordanka, because one of the items that I noted as you were speaking was, I think you commented that for every dollar spent, there's $6 in economic return. And I know you cited some other data as well, which I didn't, some of it flew by me quickly, but I'd love for you to explain that and some of these other metrics that are measuring the success.
Absolutely. Thanks for providing this opportunity. So I'll just quickly give some numbers. So 46 of participants that enter the program come from the shelter system, and 94 of them are stably housed upon exit. And I mentioned 8% of them are homeowners. 64% have either grade 12 or lower education, and 100% of them obtain post-secondary, which is college education upon exit. 94% are unemployed when they come to the program. 88 are employed upon leaving the program. 90% of them are on Ontario Works with income of $1,100 and something, $600 something dollars, and average wage upon exit is $43,000. So it's really not only the impact on, it's not just the benefits of the program is not just through housing stability, increased education, and better employment opportunities, but it's also the indirect benefits for their children as well. I want to talk about this, that they experience observing their moms working hard towards their education, being involved with mentorship programs and positive role models. Like it's on so multiple levels, not just the immediate. And it's a lengthy program. We recognize this, and that's why it's so successful, because it provides the time for women to regroup, to work on any issues while gaining education and experience through internships and employment. So,
and did I miss the number of women you're helping annually?
So we do have close to 100 units available for families, 2 and 3 bedroom units. So we annually, because it's on an ongoing, I can talk in terms of like we've helped over 300 families and 500 and something children through the course of Homeward Bound program. Because it's a long term. It's not like they stay for a couple of months. It's not, we don't have like high numbers, and that's what often is not so attractive in terms of support for the program.
Well, it might not be large numbers, but it obviously is big impact. So greatly appreciated. I do have a question I'd like to go back to David and Paul. One of the items I've noted that I don't think you've had a lot of chance to elaborate on yet is around the Moosehide Learning Journey for children and youth. So more the program geared at school-age children. Can you enlighten us what that program looks like and the benefits of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so, and thanks for the question. So there are, what we do is, you're right, we do have a learning journey program for youth. It's in different stages for different ages. So from kindergarten to grade 12, there's about 3 or 4 levels, depending on what age you're at. And that program is, what we do is we engage a lot of peer support, as well as mentorship, as well as sort of, we use like famous TikTokers, et cetera, to get the message out about involving and taking a stand. So we really encourage creativity in the space. We actually have art competitions and video competitions, and they're not really, they're very playful aspect of this, as well as, sort of an opportunity to engage in conversations. We have online workshops. So we actually go out to teachers and we have these hour-long online workshops with various folks that they can do in school. And then we lead that up to our Moosehide Campaign Day. So on Moosehide Campaign Day itself, there will be a specific youth plenary. Again, the Governor General is going to say a few words. There's going to be some famous TikTokers involved. And it's basically to encourage discussion about this, discussion about how to be respectful and kind in the space. And of course, it depends on which age you're talking at. You talk quite differently with a high schooler than you do with, early years, right? And we have 2 Indigenous First Nations teachers who design and work with that, I wouldn't call it curriculum, because there's a specific thing about curriculum, but it's definitely a learning journey, and it's meant to ladder the youngsters along.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're now going to move it over to Adrienne. Adrienne, 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the witnesses from this second panel, Mr. Stevenson, Monsieur Lacerte, and Ms. Petrova. We know that throughout the study, a lot of witnesses highlighted proposals to improve the situation. For example, having access to more resources, more prevention. Could you tell us a bit more on that? But also, those are tools. In Quebec, for example, there's a special tribunal for victims of sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And there's also the e-bracelets. What do you believe, or what do you think of these measures that could be added to educational measures, or could the federal government put in place measures that are similar to those in Quebec throughout the rest of Canada? You can do that and say anything else in conclusion.
Comme j'avais dit, peu importe, j'avais envie d'entendre des...
So if you have anything, any of the witnesses, we have 2 minutes left, so anything to say with regards to education or any other options?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Very quickly, absolutely, education is extremely important with respect to starting with young children. We found a very essential component that provide opportunities for the children of the women who are in the program, having an opportunity for positive role modeling and education through mentorship programs with students from University of Toronto and so on and so forth. Absolutely in support of educational opportunities since very young age for those children coming from families where they've witnessed domestic violence or have experienced.
Paul, you have 10 seconds.
Just that women's services have been underfunded. We would never want to infringe on dedicated resources for women's services. Investing in supports for men and healing, including investing in the Musai campaign, is absolutely critical if we're going to affect the generational change that we're trying to bring forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for our final round of questions, we're going to just pass the floor over to Leah Gazan. Leah, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And my final questions are for Jordanka Petrova. Is that, I hope I pronounced that correctly, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes,
okay,
correct.
Perfect. So prior to starting a political career, I actually had the opportunity to teach for a long time in the Faculty of Education at the University of Winnipeg in the Education Access programs. And one of the things that was great about that program is that it was a holistic program where students received mental health supports, scholarships, bursaries, tutoring if necessary, and many were non-sequential learners. And it really allowed individuals who needed other supports to access education with the ability to be successful. And I often found those students better than my main campus students. That's now in the Hansard. But this is a true story. They were my best students. They produced the best work. So would you say, when we're looking at funding educational programs through federal transfers, that we need to change things to not just look at the academic parts of a student, but the whole student?
That's exactly, and I would agree with you that our participants are often complemented by faculty and different staff at colleges as very dedicated, extremely organized, because they've learned through their life's experience to juggle multiple responsibilities. But definitely, when we talk about who is a good fit in terms of being supported with their education, is looking at their holistic situation, not just like financial need based on financial and need, but also other resources that they might need and they might be facing as a barrier. Absolutely. So support with this would be, absolutely necessary.
And I have 20 seconds. At the foundation, would you say that housing and a livable income are a critical piece in that?
Livable income, sustainable wage, housing, childcare, access to affordable childcare, therapy, counseling. Many of them are dealing with PTSD and trauma experiences. So it's variety. It's a package of services that these women need. It's never one faceted issue.
Well, I would really like to thank all of you today. Thank you so much to Paul and to David and Jordanka. You guys have been great today, so thank you. On behalf of the committee, we really appreciate if there's any other different documentation or anything that you would like to send our way, please feel free. I'm just going to remind everybody that on Tuesday we'll have as individuals Simon Lapierre, the Sakina Homes, Women's Center for Justice, for Social Justice, the Ojita, I should have put on my glasses, Matskin Kainatman, and the YWCA of Peterborough Halliburton. So everybody, thank you so much. Today's meeting is adjourned.